We are not victims. We're not a nation of victims. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Nation of Victims. We should not at our best be a nation of victims. We are a nation of victors. I mean, I do think that victimhood became a currency, right? Became more popular for a young person or whatever to claim to be a victim in the totem pole of victimhood. You get more stuff. So if you reward victimhood, you get more of it. And the more you describe yourself as a victim, the more likely you are to see yourself as one. You know, I think overcoming this victimhood culture in the United States is something that I think I'm pretty keen on right now. I think that that's for everything we've talked about, from education to AI to economic leadership to success, right? Even in overcoming the federal bureaucracy and downsizing the federal government. It's easy to point the finger at the government, and I do it because I think we should expect more of our bureaucrats and our politicians and expect a lesser size of our bureaucracy. But part of the reason that exists is that you have a culture that demands it. Right? You have an electorate that demands greater dependence on the government now rather than independence from it, and then a victimhood narrative to justify that dependence. And it's mostly come from the left, right? But I'm going to talk about it in terms that aren't partisan at this point. We won, right? So what's the point of just repeatedly pointing to the other party? This is mostly a left-wing problem. I'm also worried that it's 10% likely to be a problem on the right as well. But I don't care whether it's left-wing victimhood or victimhood culture that goes beyond the left. We are not victims. We're not a nation of victims. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Nation of Victims. We should not at our best be a nation of victims. We are a nation of victors. And I do think that one of the things President Trump's doing an outstanding job of is restoring respect for us on the global stage. I love the conversations he's opened up, from Greenland to the Panama Canal. Great conversations for us to have. But to puff our chests abroad, we got to all pull up our pants at home. I believe that. You know, that's an expression that has historically been used to preach to certain wings of the American left or whatever. I think I'm talking to all of us here. We all got to pull up our pants at home. Enough whining, start winning. The pursuit of excellence is what I want to see in America, and especially since we've now defeated the left at the ballot box. I'm keen to make sure that we restore that pursuit of excellence in America. And wherever it comes from, victimhood culture, I think we got to get over it and see ourselves as actually victorious. We're the unafraid. We're the people who nobody could stop. We're a country built on the idea of merit and meritocracy. That's America. That's what Donald Trump is standing for right now. And we can't forget that. And I hope that somebody doesn't have to pick up this, exchange 3 or 4 years from now and say, oh, gee, I wish we had heeded that earlier. I hope that's not where we're headed. I mean, the left-wing victimhood narratives have ruined this country. I don't want to see those reemerge.
Where did it stem from? Where did the victimhood stem from?
Yeah.
Is it from government handouts?
I think it stemmed in part from the Great Society in the 1960s, which was built on the idea of a victimhood narrative. And the thing about victimhood narratives that make them alluring is that there's always some truth at the kernel of it to justify it, right? And in the case of the Great Society, it's patently true that Black Americans did not have not only the same opportunities that white Americans did. Black Americans were, a century before then, slaves in the United States of America. Right? So there's a justification for it. But at a certain point in time, it actually becomes counterproductive to drive with your eyes in the rearview mirror, as I said earlier, and to wallow in that victimhood versus saying, how are we going to actually lift everybody up? So what the Great Society did, the so-called Great Society under Lyndon Johnson, it's the biggest misnomer of policy agenda in American history, was it created a new culture of dependence on the government that was justified by this victimhood narrative. But it didn't just it started Black America, but it eventually pervaded basically all swaths of America to expand the permanent existence of the state that created a new culture of an expectation of what the citizens' relationship with the state really was. And you go back to, this is Lyndon B. Johnson who pushed this. His predecessor, of course, was JFK, who famously said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Beautiful sentiment. I think what the Great Society created was the need for a new kind of declaration of independence in the country, for us to be able to say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for yourself and for your family. that in many cases would be the best way an American could serve their country, is by not having to be dependent on that government, especially relevant today when you've got a $36 trillion national debt and growing, where the interest payments on that national debt are about to be the largest line item in our federal budget. I do think that the independence from the government is an important part of that victimhood culture. Part of it is just became popular. I mean, I do think that victimhood became a currency, right? Became more popular for a young person or whatever to claim to be a victim in the totem pole of victimhood. You get more stuff, right? I had a friend who was an interviewer for Harvard's application essays, and she just comes back and says, oh my God, all I hear is the first thing they introduce themselves is what type of adversity or struggle they have faced in some sort of discrimination or some type of family sob story. Not to say that some of them aren't real, but that's what became rewarded more so than the actual achievement itself, apparently, even in Harvard admissions interviews. So if you reward victimhood, you get more of it. And the more you describe yourself as a victim, the more likely you are to see yourself as one. So it became a self-reinforcing culture where that was what was rewarded instead of excellence. And I think the way we turn this around is just as a country, yes, from the government, but also just as a culture. We revive a culture that once again rewards excellence over victimhood in all domains: academics, math, reading, science, sports, physical excellence, excellence in music, the arts, all of it. That's America. That's who we are at our best. And I do think our participation trophy culture over our championship trophy culture that has emerged in the last, 20 years or so, I think we need to shift back to that culture of excellence. And wherever it comes from, left or right, that's what I want to. That's what competition and meritocracy. Let's revive that.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.